Welcome to English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustin. Tune in as I dig deep into all things technical English, and international business communication to bring you a lifetime of knowledge in a digestible format. Hello, friends, fellow engineers, and the occasional word nerd who is listening in. Let's jump right in. Today's guest at the English for Engineers podcast is an expert in international business communication, my good old friend Candice Lee. Hey there, good to have you.
Thanks.
So, who is Candice? Candice has been working in real estate and relocation since 2011. And her commitment to people makes her not just a really great realtor, but someone who will make you feel comfortable through the whole real estate process, which is not usual, let's say it like that. However, don't be fooled by her kind and low pressured manner because she is tenacious when it comes to negotiating and securing a deal for her clients. She works extensively with corporate relocated individuals from companies such as BMW, Google, Richemont, Montblanc, Cartier, Reckitt Benckiser, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the list goes on. And quite understandably, people who relocate with their families can feel anxious or uncertain about the new area they're about to move to. So that's about Candice. But how did we two meet? I think, if I remember correctly, we met around 2000, the early 2000s, via common friends.
Mhm.
But I think it was 2008 or 2009. I couldn't quite remember when you guys asked us if we would be up for a long weekend or a weekend trip to DC. And we that could be a really long story because you guys introduced us to crab cakes in Baltimore. But
Oh,
that's
yes, the best crab cakes in
oh, the
Baltimore.
best crab cakes. Exactly. And before you got into real estate, you did web design
Mhm.
and you did the website and the logo of my very first company in
Yes. Yes.
2012, which was really, really great. So what did I leave out? What do you remember? What do you want to fill in about yourself or how we met?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we're both foodies, so I think that was a good connection. So that helped our
That's our
us
bonding.
to be friends. And yeah, and then our trip, of course, was partly surrounded around. Of course, you had to see the sights of DC, but
But
food
it
is
was very
always
food
involved. Yeah,
centered, yeah. Same
of
in
course.
Barcelona, very
Yeah.
food centered trip we had.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah,
True.
so as my husband stopped over, we couldn't find him as he's getting snacks in the shops, yes.
Candice,
Yes.
when we were discussing our chat last week, we were talking about relocation and how much uncertainty or even anxiety can build up in people who are about to move to another country or even another continent,
Mhm,
um, and who are about to move to a place where they have to speak in a foreign language. And we were talking about CEOs, we were talking about specialists in executive functions, highly educated people there, and still they build up anxiety. Can you give us some examples of how those emotions play out when you deal with those clients?
sure, definitely. You figure these individuals are experts in their fields, but they have the uncertainty of the English language and communication. And a lot of times, I have one example that comes to mind of a man that I was working with who was Korean, who I met. And later on, as I got to know him, he told me that at first, because he saw my name, Lee, he was desperately hoping that I was Asian, hopefully Korean, so that he could speak to me in his, native tongue. So, but it was funny because I just remember how anxious he was and the struggle that he had. I could see it, as he tried to uh, communicate what he was trying to say. He did a great job, but I think it's also a confidence level when it's not something that you're doing every day until you're submerged in it. There's just that confidence that sometimes gets in the way. And I think sometimes you have, in my experience, something that you want to say in the exact way you want to say it, but you don't have those exact words. So it is sometimes being also a little bit creative and compromising to get your point across, and
Mm.
not maybe not exactly how you had pictured it, but to be
Not
understandable.
as eloquent as
Right.
you are in your mother language.
Exactly.
And people sometimes not sometimes, very often underestimate how much energy it costs to
Yeah.
communicate in another language a whole day.
Yeah, he would hem and haw, and it was just really funny, and I would give him a hard time, because when we got to know each other and we were comfortable with each other, he told me that he was hoping that I spoke Korean, and, I said, "No, I'm here to give you practice. You needed me. You needed an American to help you along the way." So he laughed, and we became good friends, but it's just funny to see that, so yeah, there's a lot of emotions involved for sure.
Mhm. So how did you make him feel comfortable?
I um I think just listening,
Mhm.
giving him time to say what he had to say. And I think the fact that I could understand the point that he was getting at. It wasn't like um I know he's a professional person, and that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Of course he does. So I think it's just allowing that time and the understanding. I think I work with so many international people through the years that I'm also used to different sounds of things. So when he did speak, or anybody that I work with that is international speaks, sometimes it takes a minute kind of to get to the intonations of what they're saying, but often I think I'm a little bit more in tune maybe than someone who doesn't have that experience. So I think that made him feel more comfortable too. That I could understand, and also when I saw him struggling with other people, like when we would do work with different services, because I would do help him get banking, Social Security, the whole thing. Um, I could also help interpret a little bit, because I would know when I heard someone say something like that's going to be not make sense to somebody who's international who's coming here,
It's too
and kind of,
complicated.
yeah, and then just straighten it out like, okay, this is what they mean. Oh, okay, okay, so, and I think that made him feel more comfortable also.
I don't know if you remember, but we had the same problem when we were first met in the early 2000s. That's
Hmm.
about 20 years ago. And I had a hard time understanding you because you were using so many sayings and phrases. Like every sentence had some US American expression in it that I was not familiar with. So I learned a lot from you. Yeah.
My idioms. And the funny thing is I learned a lot from you too, because you didn't tell me that, but a mutual friend told me that you would contact her and say, "What does this mean? What does this mean in English?" And I'm like, "Man, I didn't realize how many I say. I do say a lot." So actually now it's funny because I am more aware of that. So when I do speak to people from other countries, I'll say, "Do you have this saying?" And then I'll say it. And then this way, if they don't, they could say, "No, what does that mean?" Or they'll say it in their way, because usually it's a little bit different. So that's kind of
Oh
funny.
yeah. So you're building common ground, and even if there's no common ground because the saying does not exist in their language, then they learn something
Right.
and
Exactly.
and have an easier time going on. Yeah,
And feel comfortable expressing it too. I'd like to say, "No, I have no idea what that means," because,
yeah.
kind of open the way to that.
That's a really good point to. What did you just say? Oh, I forgot. I have those 3 second things where I just forget a sentence halfway
No,
through.
no, by phrasing it that way of, "Do you have this saying in your country?"
Exactly.
Then it's like, if they don't feel like idiots, like, "I don't know what you're talking about." You know?
And and make it normal to ask, do you have that saying in your country? Does it exist? Do you say it like this? Just make language a thing you can talk about.
Mhm.
I read an interesting quote today. Unfortunately, it's by unknown, so we cannot link it back to someone, but it's quite good. I read it to you. I used to think communication was key until I realized comprehension is. You can communicate all you want to someone, but if they don't understand you, it won't reach them the way you need it to.
Very true.
And I really like that because we can use the most fancy words, most eloquent sentence structure. If the other person is not getting our point, then yeah, it
Yep.
doesn't make sense to even open your mouth. And
Yep.
that's what a lot of people forget. So have
That's
are
powerful.
you yeah, I really liked it.
Mhm.
Instagram for the win. You were telling me that you had another client who sounded quite demanding,
Mhm.
almost rude when he was writing emails.
Yes, I've had a few that have come off like that, and it's funny because yeah, their emails would sound like, "Oh man, what am I in store for with this client coming in?" Very very short, very curt, very like sound demanding. I was like, "Oh man," but then when I would meet them in person, they would be not like that at all. Be very nice and very like a pleasure to work with. So it was just the translation of how they came off in email that scared me a little bit.
It scared you even.
Well, I work extensively with these people, so yeah, if that's I'm like, oh no, what do I have in store for myself? But no, then super nice and were like a pleasure to work with. Really enjoyed
Mhm,
working with him and his wife. But yeah, it turned out it was just the translation and how they came off in the
mhm.
when they were writing.
And written communication can be quite different in different countries.
Hmm.
I see it a lot with my German engineers writing emails in English, and it's a perfectly fine. It would be a perfectly fine email in German because
Hmm.
that's just the way how Germans communicate in via emails. But it's blunt and rude in English. But they're the nicest people you can imagine. But their emails are horrendous to an English native speaker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had that experience.
Yeah. And I think if you would get a polite email that's full with grammatical errors, you would think, oh, what a nice person. Their spelling is off, their grammar is off, but oh, what a nice person. So sometimes etiquette is way more important than grammar and spelling, I think.
I think definitely in the way that it comes off to somebody.
Yeah.
Definitely, because as long as you can still communicate your intent without saying it perfectly. But if you
Yeah.
say it in a nice way for the other person to get a nice feeling about how you are, I think, yeah, it makes a world of difference.
If you had one tip, let's say whatever you can push into 30 seconds, what tip do your best, Candice. What
Okay.
tip would you give someone who starts working with an international team? Let that be colleagues or stakeholders or clients.
My tip would be don't be afraid, I think, to say what you need to say. I think a lot of times I see it that there's more hesitation just because, especially the people I've worked with that are new to the language or are the least confident in the language. They're hesitant in expressing themselves, even though they have great ideas and they have a lot to say. So I would say, don't be afraid. Just do your best. And that, in the most, I'd say 99.9% of the time, you'll be understood, especially if you're with an international team who expects you to not say it perfectly and are there to listen and hear your ideas. Make sure your ideas shine through.
Oh, that's a good. Make sure your ideas shine through. I love that. Cool. That was the relocation part, but you are also in real estate,
Mhm.
which is quite exciting, I think. Could you briefly walk us through the process of buying a home in your area? And we maybe we have to say that your area is New Jersey.
My area is New Jersey. Yep, New York, New Jersey metro area, but New Jersey is the state that I'm licensed in. Um, and yeah, so would you like to know the process from an international standpoint or from just if
Yes.
you were okay. So if you were an international person coming to the US to New Jersey to make a purchase, right?
Hmm.
So, so as an international person, if you did not have a social security number, which is kind of key in the US, um, then one of the things that you would need to do, anybody would need to get a mortgage pre-approval if you're not paying cash. So as an international person, you would also need to do that. It would just require more documentation. So often it requires proof of funds, and then there's just a lot of documents that they'll require. Sometimes they require a certain reserve that you have to have. Often it's at least 25% down payment.
Wow.
So those are all things that you would just need to require or be required throughout the process to make sure that when your loan officer contacts you and says, listen, we need this document, that you get them that document as soon as you can. Because
Hmm.
it's more of a process. It takes a little bit longer in order to get all those ducks in a row. There you go.
Another saying, ducks in a row. And you used one before, but I forgot to mention it. Yeah, to get all your ducks in a row. If anybody is listening and doesn't know what that means, just shoot me an email. I will explain it to you. Or Google it. There's your friend Uncle Google as well.
Yep. Get everything in order. We can get that.
Exactly. Yeah, get your ducks in a row. Um, so that's about getting your ducks in a row regarding your background, your own background as a buyer.
Yeah, so normally it's financial. This your financial background of what they need to prove, that you have the money. Usually you need a certain amount of funds in a US bank account, or they need to trace where that came from, just so that, to avoid fraud and probably money laundering and a whole lot of other things.
Things.
So all those things
Yeah.
would have to be. But once you have your pre-approval, then much of the rest of the process is like anyone who's local. I think the trickiest part is that part, and then it would just be finding a place, looking at it, and then you
That you
put
like
that you like
and can afford.
and can afford, that you don't mind that you're going to be paying monthly on your mortgage, um, and then you put an offer in. So
Hmm.
you put an offer in with your terms. And in New Jersey, which is different per state, is that we have a 3-day attorney review process. So after an offer is accepted, it goes into attorney review. And during those 3 days, anything can change. So you could cancel for any reason. So nothing's set in stone until after attorney review, really. You put in your best of what you really intend, but that's really where it goes. And then after that, it goes under contract. And then that's when, after it goes under contract, you would you would do your home inspection, and get your things in order for your closing. And during that time, you'd get your mortgage commitment closer to before your closing.
Interesting. You mentioned the process of a home inspection.
Mhm,
And as this is called English for engineers,
mhm.
this is what we're really interested in as well. So, what goes on with a home inspection? Why is that important? How thorough is such an inspection?
Mhm. So,
What are you doing? What are you
so
handling, taking care
yeah,
of?
so usually a standard. There's a lot of different companies, so you can call them up and see what they do and pick which one you like best. We usually recommend a couple to our clients, and then they would schedule the day they would come out, and basically they would go through the house. So the home inspection takes a couple of hours, and they go through. Um, Looking through, running your water. Is there any issues here? Do we see cracks? Are there any strange leaks going on? Anything like that they would go through. a home inspection doesn't cover, they're not going to open up your walls, obviously.
Mhm.
They're not going to be able to do anything like that, but they would check your attic and see if there's a basement or a crawl space. They would look through that as much as they can.
So it's more visual inspection.
It's more visual. I mean, they would like put on, they would run your appliances, they would, check your water. They would do all
Mhm.
those things also, check for any leaks or anything. But it's not where they're, like I said, they're not, it's not invasive. So they wouldn't be anything. I had one inspection where they felt like the wall might be soft in the basement,
Ooh.
but they weren't able to open it up because they don't own it, and it would be evasive if they were to break that down. So they just would put in recommendations, what they thought about that. If you wanted to do another test, if you felt like it might be a mold issue, if you wanted to do a mold test. So there's multiple additional inspections you can do other than your standard inspection.
Mhm. So how long do you have the time to do such an inspection? What is the time frame between, in what window do you have to do that?
So usually it's within 10 days.
That's quite fast.
So, um, yeah, so usually 10, maybe 15. Sometimes you give them, sometimes you'll even say, I think maybe 15 is standard. Sometimes we'll do less if it's, you want to be aggressive and say, listen, we're going to get this done right away so we can, not hold up the process. Some sellers like that because then they know that you're on top of it and you're going to, do it right away. But yeah, I mean, usually you schedule it, they come right out, they do the inspection that day. If there's any follow-up inspections that need to be done, you can. For older homes, we recommend different things too, or certain areas. So we might recommend a chimney inspection or a sewer line inspection. If they have a pool inspection, different
Mhm.
things just to make sure everything's structural, everything's sound. If there are any issues, and then if you don't have if you didn't waive any contingencies, you can go back to the sellers and say, listen, this is the issue, or your lawyer can. This is the issue, and can we work this out? Can either you cover this or we split this, or and then you negotiate.
Mhm. So how thorough is a sewer line inspection? And what if something is wrong with the sewer? What do you do?
So recently I did it was an older home, and they recommended, because we only did it's been a really hot market. It's starting to calm down a bit, but even in other areas, it's pretty moving along. There will be multiple offers in, but this was really hot, and they really wanted it. So we waived our right to small things, basically. So it was only major structural, environmental, mechanical issues that we would, you know, have any say on. So we wanted to make sure everything was sound. And one of the things is a sewer line, because that can be super expensive. So they
Oh
actually,
yeah.
it's a professional person that does this for a living. They snake the line with a camera.
Mhm.
They go down and they go as far as they can go. Um, I've had ones before that had blockages where, like, maybe there were roots in there and they couldn't go a certain way. Then they had to break those up in order to go further. So you want to basically be able to go to the street because you're responsible up into the street. So yeah, then you could put sleeves on them. I mean, but we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars if there's an issue.
You said structural, but also environmental
Mhm.
checks that you do. What's
So
that?
so often in our area, especially, um, some homes used to have oil tanks and oil as a fuel. Uh, Gas is common, but there still are oil as a fuel in many homes. But what they used to do would be they were underground, and oftentimes they would abandon them. And
Oh.
sometimes, yeah, and sometimes not in the way that they should. They just
Mhm.
cover them over, and then that was it. So we often, especially in certain areas, but we'll often recommend a tank sweep. And what they do is
Mhm.
they actually sweep the whole area
The surface.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
underground. They sweep
Okay.
it and see if they find anything. I mean, I think one of my colleagues, for their house, they found a metal car buried underneath the ground.
A car?
A car. Yeah. So, I mean, you never know what you'll find.
Okay.
But if there is an
At
oil
least no
tank,
bodies, so that's good.
I don't know if it would come up unless there was metal, but yes, true. Um, but if there is a tank, then nowadays they just take it up and make sure it was decommissioned correctly, and then they take a soil sample to make sure that there wasn't
Mhm.
any leakage, and that's where the environmental would to come into play if there was some kind of leakage that came through.
Interesting. Do you have any juicy details, a funny story besides the car? That was already fun, I guess.
Yeah.
That you can share
Some juicy details.
about really weird details you came across.
Oh, I mean, there's always something crazy that comes up. Um, I mean, the car was very interesting to find a car underneath your land. Not exactly something you would expect.
No,
Um, just trying to think if there's anything during an inspection. Hmm.
like hidden rooms in a basement.
No hidden rooms. I haven't come across any hidden rooms yet. I think the when they did take off the wall, so that
Mm,
one inspection that I went and the wall was soft, we couldn't tell if there was holes in the wall in the basement or if it was something that was soft and needed, like, correction.
mhm,
So, they did rip it down, and it was an issue that they had to fix where it had they think there was maybe a leak from the window, and it had softened up the wall. So, that was a bit tricky for them to have to do. But I've had things where you move stuff and there's, like, flooring missing or,
mhm.
I had someone who um, they moved into their home, and when they did, they realized that the person had painted around all of their furniture. So when they took the furniture out, they
Oh,
just had the outline of all the furniture throughout the
that's
place.
so bad. That's already hilarious again.
So they basically had to repaint everything. But things like that you don't really expect, but you don't know until it's gone.
Until
So
until you know. Hmm.
and
Interesting.
I had an interesting one actually with my own home. That my seller had switched out the high-end appliances for really cheap old ones.
Oh, after you
Yeah,
viewed the house and before you moved in.
yeah, so, closing
Nice.
day, I walked in and was like, "What?" I didn't realize they switched out 2 things because in the US, your appliances are included in your home.
Mhm,
But the refrigerator stuck out as so old to me. It was like 1950s, gray, like banged up, and I was like, "What happened here?" So I was like, "I can't believe it." But then after we did the closing, I came back, I realized they switched out the stove too. So the stove was like super cheap, like non-digital, and it was a really nice one before. It's like, "Man." So yeah, you have to now I'm more tuned to watch for those things. But it's hard in the end to say, okay, it wasn't a brand new thing. It was a it was used already. So, like, how do you equate that to dollars?
what did you do? Just forget about it, or
Yeah,
did you approach her?
I brought it to the closing. I wasn't in real estate at the time. I think I would probably do some things a little differently, but, yeah, the lawyer was like, "It's hard because I had thought it was just this refrigerator. I didn't realize it was both appliances." But he said, "It's hard because it wasn't a brand new refrigerator.
So
So
what you
it
gonna
would
do?
be yeah, it would be what? Like a couple $100 and, to
Yeah.
equate that and then to stop the closing, just wasn't worth it. But it was the principle.
Yeah, true.
I was like,
It's just not nice. Yeah.
"It's not nice." Yeah, so
Yeah.
stuff like that.
You told me about a nice thing you're doing for your clients, regarding, what you just told me half an hour ago. You had 8 viewings today with one client, and it's kinda difficult to keep all the details in mind of all the different houses that you visit. So what are you handing out?
Well, usually I put together, when I do, my showings, especially when we see a lot of them. I I mean, I do this for everyone, not just my international clients, because I do work with local people as well. But I feel especially when you're coming from a new country, everything's new, and then you're thrown into a housing search. It's overwhelming because everything is new. But what I like to put together is I put together a worksheet. And so I map out all the houses, and I have a map with the locations of each place so that they can kind of orient it themselves. And then I list them and I break down the address, the price, how many bedrooms and baths, when it's available, and then I leave area for notes on each one so that they can have it on one place, so that when they do see a lot of them, I remind them to take notes to make
Yeah, I
sure.
like the kitchen in that house. I like the bedroom, and the
Right.
other one, I like.
I didn't like the stairs were too steep, or this rug was not nice, whatever you're making a note of. Right. So whatever you're making your note of what you like, what you don't, and if you have other ones that blow those ones out of the water, make sure you keep those on top so that at the end of the day, you're not really looking at 8 or 10 properties. You're just keeping in mind those top 3.
Yeah.
And then you have
Another
it all at once.
idiom. Another idiom, to blow it out of the water.
Hmm?
What does
Yes,
that mean?
blow it out of the water. Like, what did I just say? How did I use that?
If you see other houses that blow it out of the water.
Oh, yes. So if you see other houses that are so much greater than that one,
Ah,
so then
interesting.
it blows it out of the water. You get rid of that one.
I
Throw it
know
out.
you for so long, but that one I've never heard before.
I gotta throw all my idioms at you, Olivia.
Yeah,
Today's the
please bring
day.
them on. Bring them
Thank
on.
you. Yeah. So yeah, so then you get rid of that one, and then you have your top like floating 3 of great ones, and then you're not, you know,
Overwhelmed.
overwhelmed at the end of the day because it's exhausting. It's emotional.
And it's,
Yeah.
yeah, so many impressions. You can't just, your filter kind of
Mhm.
doesn't
Right.
work
Yeah,
at the
to
end
take
of a
into
long day.
consideration, and you know, so and you get this initial impression of a place. So yeah, so that's my recommendation. And I just feel like for myself, having it in one place at the end of the day kind of helps as you kind of make decisions.
I like your system.
Thank you very much.
I like systems, but that's a really good system. I like that you even put a map on there for them. So it's not only a spreadsheet, it's also a visual representation of the area they've been to, which is
Well,
really
I'm a
great.
graphic designer too at
Oh,
heart.
yes, almost
So
forgot.
I
True.
do graphic design, but still, but yeah, that's my heart. So I have to throw some visually pleasing
Something beautiful
worksheets
in there.
together.
That is
Hopeful and
great.
pretty. Why not, right?
Yes, true. If you now think, I need Candice experience in my professional life, I'm going to relocate to the States. I need a house in New Jersey. What did you call it? New York metropolitan area.
Well, we're right near the city, so but yeah, I do a
Yes.
whole lot of areas in Bergen, Morris, Passaic, Hudson counties.
Then I link her company details at the end of the podcast subscription so you can get a hold of her and maybe work with her. Thank you so much for joining in, Candice. I had a blast as always.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed myself too.
Thanks for all the idioms.
Yeah, I wish I would have thought some more, but I'm glad I got a few in for you
Oh,
there.
I got 4 or 5. Yeah. I will also post them in the podcast description for you guys who are listening in. Okay, that was it. That was English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustine. Talk to you soon.